just overlook me. Yeah, if things don't pan out, keep it cooking. You're not a fan, but you keep on looking. Look, don't be concerned with what people saying. Be concerned when they don't care to say it. Funny how people will act like they know you, but they don't even got a clue what they're saying.
Yeehaw, soldiers! It's your boy, the Anime Sage, coming at you with another video. And this is essentially an ethical dilemma in the world of One Piece, with letting Don Krieg starve. So, yeah, let's get right into this. So, I guess I'll just go over the usual stuff. Watch my community tab like a hawk, because that's pretty important because I post vid updates, polls, stuff like that. And then, of course, you want to follow me on Twitter at AnimeSage4, Instagram is anime_sage4, and of course, my Discord link to that will be in the description. And this is a series I kind of want to do because I want to break down some ethical decisions in anime, and I want to break down why a certain decision would be right or wrong. So this is the first one. This is called Ethical Dilemma, as you can see by the title, letting Don Krieg starve. So what am I talking about? So in One Piece of chapter 46, we had the arrival of Don Krieg, who was around the second major pirate that we were introduced to, after like Buggy, and well, you could also count Lady of Elvita, but you know, whatever. Don Krieg was one of the most fearsome pirates in the entire season. In fact, he went to the Grand Line before getting destroyed by a certain person, if we all know who that is. And I probably should have put in a spoiler warning because, well, you know, it's kind of, if you haven't read the first 100 chapters of One Piece, well, I'm going to make a lot of references to what happens afterwards, so I would suggest you probably click off this video after that. But, okay, in chapter 46, you have now a weakened Don Krieg who has been going through a lot of hunger issues and is in near starvation. This means that he could very likely die. It is also known that his crewmates have also been in the same position, because over 100 of his crewmates have, well, went through the same trauma, and they could very likely die as well. Now, in this chapter, Sanji actually did feed Don Krieg, and Zeph ended up giving them all the food. And when that happened, all the chefs, all the customers were very critical about it. But Zeph, understanding that what it's like to be very hungry and not having food, along with Sanji, both of them realized that they should at least feed him and feed the crewmates, because no one should go through that because of what they experienced with near starvation. Like, this dude Zeph literally ate his own leg just to survive. Like, that part is crazy. Now, there are other ways to break this down even further. The first is basics. Is it right to let 100 people starve to death? And I hope you guys answer with no. Even if you have the background of Don Krieg, knowing that he's this horrible person, at the moment he is very innocent and very vulnerable because he can't really do anything to anybody. So when you put him in that position and you're purposefully allowing him to starve to death, that and potentially his hundreds of other people, how are you any better than Don Krieg? You will have just killed over 100 people. This is why at a certain point we ask ourselves, how are we better than the criminal that we killed versus capital punishment? It comes up in debates a lot, like, are we even better of killing off the person, like an eye for an eye type thing? And then people also go with like, well, why not just put him in prison and stuff like that? Letting these people starve to death would essentially be like killing them off, because you at least could have done something about it. And they are also very innocent in this case, because again, they can't hurt anybody. The second thing here that we have to break down is, of course, the turn of Gin. Now, Gin later in this arc, in the Barate arc, was so grateful for the kindness that he received from Sanji that he decided to not only hesitate to kill Sanji, but he ended up going up against Krieg. Krieg was shocked about this, but as we saw in the chapter, or I'm sorry, in the arc, he couldn't bring himself to do it because it was the first amount of actual kindness that he ever gotten, even more from Don Krieg. Plus, he couldn't even like allow himself to just like follow the orders and just like bring himself to do any of his actions anymore. He still loved Don Krieg, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. It's not like he was trying to go against him, but in this moment he did, because it's just the first amount of kindness he's ever gotten. That's the impact that kindness has on a person. sometimes when you are treated so well in life, when you haven't really had that type of stuff happen to you in life, you kind of change a little bit. And now Don Krieg definitely didn't do that after he got the food. He still was the same person, but the fact that someone like Geem, the second in command, essentially his most trusted crewmate, turn like that from all the kindness they receive, kind of speaks volumes on what kindness can do to a person. And that's kind of where it goes into. If Don Krieg had the same reaction as Geem and had turned on and had made a bit of a change for himself, that would have also allowed some good in the world, because you have another group of good pirates that are out in the world and sailing about. Not some of these, and maybe Don Krieg will at least try to repent for his crimes. Now, it's kind of hard to like debate for that, but people have been able to change. We've seen arcs like in MHA try to redeem Endeavor after the abuse of his own family, which there will be potentially a price to pay for his crimes if you've seen some Horikoshi interviews, but it's kind of, at least Endeavor's trying to make an attempt to try to redeem himself a little bit. And that's fine, because we have seen abusers in real life go for their own redemption arcs, because there's a reason why people abuse. It's not like it comes out of nowhere. Sometimes people when they were younger were abused, and sometimes other people and that's just how they kind of learn to cope, and then they become abusers themselves. It's only after they get some form of intervention that maybe at a certain point they can at least heal. It doesn't work all the time, but there's at least always a reason why someone abuses another person. It's not like they pop out the window and be like, I'm gonna abuse a person one day. No, that's not how it happens. It's based off like environment or circumstances. Now, the other thing I want to go over is this part. It's the part where we get into why this would violate some form of ethical boundaries. Now, have you ever heard of the principle of double effect? The principle of double effect is based off of certain decisions. So, as we all know, a good action and an intended good action, and that results from it, it's good. And then a bad action and bad intention, well, that's bad. That's kind of obvious, you know what I'm saying? Now, we go into some of the other areas. Now, good can equal a bad action if you did not intend the bad action. So an example of this is essentially, let's say that you had a friend that you wanted to cheer up, but it just resulted in the person getting more depressed and a bit more angry. You would not be ethically incorrect or morally incorrect for that, because of the fact that you didn't have the bad intention of trying to make he or she upset. You just wanted to cheer the person up. Now, if it was like you had the intention of being a bad person and you wanted to make that person even more depressed or angry or sad or whatever, that would be a bad action. But if you didn't have the intention of doing it, you just wanted to be like, I want to cheer this person up, you were not morally incorrect. Now, let's go to the second point, the second type of area here, which is a good and bad action happening at the same time. Well, what does that mean? Well, in terms of that, you have, let's say that you need to chop off your arm and you need to save your life, essentially, like an amputation. Basically, if you would be essentially losing an arm, so that's kind of bad, but you essentially be saving your life. So essentially, the intention is to at least save that person's life, and it's coincided by you having to cut your arm off. But that's not wrong. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's not wrong in that sense, because that's why we have a lot of amputations going forward. And I could probably also link a couple articles to this principle double effect. I got like a Britannia article, as well as a Stanford article on that, so I could link those two down in the description. And then the final thing is that a bad effect cannot equal a good effect. Now, the bad intention cannot equal the good effect. So an example of this is, it was a recent video I watched from the Illuminati. Now, this one was pertaining to Autism Speaks, but also pertained to something called the Judge Rodenberg Center. The Judge Rodenberg Center prided itself on trying to heal people who had neurological disorders like autism, Asperger's, all that stuff. Mostly those who self-harm themselves, more so, like unintentionally self-harm themselves because they bang their heads against the wall and stuff like that. They were trying to stop that behavior by shocking them over and over again, essentially torture. And they were feeding them like 44 milliamps. And for reference, I believe around 100 milliamps is able to kill a human adult So there's little justification to say that why would you give half of that to a child? That's just not okay. And it also caused 6 kids to die at least. Now, the intention again here was to at least make sure these kids could recover from their little self-inflicting issues and stuff like that. But if you're trying to torture kids in the process, that is bad, and it cannot equal that intended effect. In fact, it always most likely made the bad effect happen, which is the kid died. So that's why something like that is wrong from a moral and ethical standpoint, because you are torturing kids to get that gain. You see what I'm saying here? It's not like, and there are also some other stuff like it burns skin. It could cause something like strokes and stuff like that, because, you know, getting those shocks repeatedly over and over again is not fun. So yeah, that's why something like that would be wrong. Another example of this would be Thanos's little, I'm gonna snap half the population in hopes of, you know, better future and stuff like that, food and stuff like that. That's kind of why it's wrong, because you're essentially killing half the population. You're murdering essentially half of the, no, you're not an entire population, or you're murdering half the universe's population. You're killing so many people at once. This is now this would violate the third effect I'm referencing right now, which is bad action equaling good effect. As mentioned in the chapter, it was said that his death and him starving to death would be good for the world. But in this sense, you are essentially allowing 100 people to starve. Now, let's just forget about those 100 people for a second. You're letting a singular man starve to death for his past actions, when there's a possibility that 1, he could be on the right path to change like Geen was, and 2, the sense of justice here doesn't make sense when you could be just as bad as him for letting another man starve to death. Not only that, but you are committing a bad action, a morally bad action, letting a man that you could help save starve to death in hopes of achieving peace and justice in the world. And this is kind of goes back into like the world of One Piece, because 1, there is a lack of order, 2, the government is corrupt, and 3, there's always a lack of justice that is attained. Look, in an arc later, you had people wanting to find a way of justice against Arlong, but that had not been achieved until Luffy and everybody else came and stomped them out. It's very rare that people in the world of pirates are able to achieve justice for the civilians, because 1, their government is corrupt, because we saw that in the Arlong arc. 2, there's a lack of order because the government cannot handle all these pirates running around, and they can't really handle the most powerful pirates, and some of the most powerful marines are stuck at the Grand Line. So that's not going to work. And it's again very hard to at least maintain all those pirates again, because this is a golden age of pirates. Essentially, you want to hunt after the One Piece, essentially. So the fact is that the fact you have like all these pirates running around, it feels like there's a lack of justice that can be even attained. So when you see someone this vulnerable, or someone who's so infamous, so vulnerable at that point, you want to at least figure out, okay, finally we can attain some justice, we can finally attain some order around here. Because if you take down one of the most infamous pirates, you kind of get a W here. But at the cause of it, you're doing something that's worse, because you are letting that person starve to death. They didn't attack you, they came to you for help, and they just wanted some food. And this is why I feel as if, I'm sorry, not really how I feel, but this is why this kind of violates some ethical boundaries, because again, at the cost of trying to attain some form of order and some form of justice, you were again killing hundreds of people. And I keep reiterating this point way too many times, but this is kind of what it's like. Let's just forget that they're these evil pirates for a second. You are just essentially killing over 100 people, which is insanity. So taking all that into consideration, this is why this decision to let Don Krieg starve would have been very incorrect, and that's why Sanji and Zeph were right from a moral and ethical standpoint. There are ways to attain justice, and Don Krieg did get his later on in the Barate arc, but that was not how you want to achieve it. Now, of course, this is anime. It has gotten us to root for guys who have committed essentially mass murder. You know who I'm referring to, right? Like Yagami. But this isn't one of those decisions like in the world of One Piece, which kind of has a lack of justice and a lack of order, that it presents one of those dilemmas that actually can apply to a lot of different scenarios in terms of, should I essentially do this to a certain group of people? Should I essentially do this to a person because they did something like that? Stuff like that. It's like, and I feel like it's a very good form of a dilemma that was presented here in the Barate arc. And I feel like I felt like really talking about it as someone who's gone for the first 115 chapters of One Piece, and I still got a long way to go before I can fully catch up. But this really stuck out to me a lot, because it was one of those things you can literally look in terms of like ethical and moral study and be like, huh, this is something that's a very interesting dilemma here. So it's very interesting to me. I really love it. So yeah. Now, let me know if you want me to do more of these. I feel like this could be a very interesting type series. This is probably the first one I'm doing. And it was just the one thing that stuck out to me as something I wanted to do like a dilemma on. I could probably do stuff for like Death Note, Naruto, and stuff like that, and present those type of moral and ethical decisions here and there. And yeah, I guess that's probably where I'm at from this point. And I guess before I go, you could probably argue that in the world of One Piece you were kind of smashing against other people for like stuff like revenge. It's like, I feel like at a certain point that at least it was probably in self-defense in order to like take back a town, essentially. Like when Luffy was taking out Arlong, those types of guys. And at certain points, if they get in a situation where they have to like kill a person, it might have to be like either in self-defense, but I wouldn't say it's like necessarily in like cold blood or something like that. As someone who's just gone for the first 115 chapters, I don't know what happens later on. I don't want to know what happens later on because I want to get to that first. But this is kind of where I want to put myself in terms of how should I decide from an ethical, moral standpoint. Because no matter if Don Krieg comes back, like Lady Alvida or like Buggy, I don't think this will change my stance on this little video right here. Because I think that because this decision, for the most part, would still be cut and throat bad if you let Don Krieg start, no matter what happens later on. I don't care. So yeah, thank you all for watching this installment of Ethical Dilemma on One Piece, and I hope you guys really do enjoy this. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to keep going for the One Piece manga, and I'm pretty excited to at least see if there could be more like ethical dilemmas, and maybe I could look back for some more manga, stuff like that, to present some more ethical dilemmas here. But this has been your boy, the Anime Sage, signing out. Peace, yorha, bye bye. If you want something like fame, then go do something okay.